The relentless sun of the American West beat down on the dusty trail, baking the earth into a brittle, cracked surface. The air, thick with the scent of sagebrush and dry grass, offered no relief. Eleanor Grant clutched the worn leather satchel on her lap, her knuckles white. She had left the manicured gardens and hushed grief of Boston behind, trading it for this harsh, unforgiving landscape. Her husband, Thomas, a man who had promised her a life of comfort and security, was gone. A sudden, cruel illness had claimed him, leaving Eleanor with nothing but a small inheritance and a mountain of silence. Seeking a fresh start, she had answered a newspaper advertisement from the Western Land Agency, promising plots of fertile land in the untamed territories for a new life. The agent, a man with a slick smile and a handshake that felt like wet sand, had sold her on a dream. He described a cozy homestead near the thriving town of Red Creek, a place where she could build a new life for herself. The map he gave her, a crudely drawn piece of paper, pointed to a specific plot, the Oak Creek Ranch. The stagecoach ride was a bone-rattling ordeal. For 3 weeks, she had endured the cramped space, the stifling heat, and the constant fear. When they finally arrived at the edge of what the driver called Carter's Land, her heart sank. This wasn't the bustling community she'd been promised. There was no thriving town in sight, only vast, desolate plains that stretched to the horizon. The driver, a grizzled man with a face like a road map, pointed a calloused finger. "That's it, ma'am. Carter's Ranch. The end of the line for you." As the stagecoach rumbled away, leaving a plume of dust in its wake, Eleanor stood alone. The sun was beginning its descent, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple. In the distance, a small, solitary cabin with a dilapidated porch and a sagging roof stood like a lonely sentinel against the vast expanse. A lone figure was mending a fence post. He was tall and lean, with broad shoulders and the kind of weathered look that only the West could carve into a man. He moved with a practiced grace, his muscles coiling and releasing with each swing of his hammer. She took a deep breath, her heart pounding against her ribs. This wasn't right. The agent had described a different place, a different life. She walked towards the figure, her leather boots kicking up small clouds of dust. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice shaky but firm. "Is this the Oak Creek Ranch?" The man stopped, turning slowly. His eyes, the color of a stormy sky, were framed by a network of fine lines etched by the sun. His face was unshaven, a thick, dark stubble hiding a sharp jawline. He stared at her, a look of utter confusion on his face. He leaned on his hammer, his gaze taking in her fine city dress, the delicate satchel, and the look of bewildered desperation in her eyes. "No, ma'am," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "This is Carter's Ranch. Been in my family for 3 generations. Oak Creek is 2 days' ride north of here. You've been sent to the wrong place." Eleanor's world tilted. The words hit her like a physical blow. The promise, the hope, the fresh start she had clung to, it was all a lie. Tears welled in her eyes, hot and stinging, but she forced them back. She wouldn't break down here, not in front of this stranger. "I don't understand," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "The agent, he told me—" He watched her, a flicker of something she couldn't name, pity, empathy, in his eyes. That agent, probably a scoundrel named Elias. He's been tricking folks for years. He sells the same plot to a dozen people, pockets the money and disappears. He knows this land is worthless for a single woman on her own. A sob escaped her lips. The shame and the hopelessness were overwhelming. She was stranded, with no money for the journey back, no one to turn to. "I have nowhere to go," she said, the words a raw confession. "I spent everything I had on this journey." He straightened up, his shoulders tense. He had seen countless hopeful souls pass through this land, only to be broken by its harsh reality. But this woman was different. She wasn't an adventurer or a dreamer. She was a widow, alone and utterly lost. He could see the sorrow in her eyes, a reflection of his own. He looked at the vast, empty sky, then back at her. "I have an old shed you can stay in for the night," he offered, his tone gruff but not unkind. "You'll have to find your way to town in the morning." As the last light faded from the sky, Eleanor sat on a hay bale in the small, dusty shed. The scent of dry grass and horse filled the air. She felt a profound sense of isolation, a cold emptiness that was far worse than the loneliness she had felt in her Boston home. She was at the end of the world, and she had no one. The next morning, Eleanor found Jack already at work, chopping wood with a powerful rhythmic swing. She approached him cautiously. "Mr. Carter," she began, "I don't know what to do. I have no money, and I can't walk to town. It's too far." He paused, leaning on his axe. "The town of Red Creek is 30 miles from here," he said, his voice matter-of-fact. "It would take you 2 days, and you'd be a target. There's no place for a woman alone to find work." A wave of panic washed over her. "I can work," she insisted. "I can cook, clean, mend clothes, anything you need." He let out a short, humorless laugh. "I don't need a housekeeper, ma'am. I have all I need to run this ranch." His voice was final, but something in her desperation must have resonated with him. He had his own demons and his own loneliness. Her presence and intrusion was also a disruption to his suffocating silence. "There is one thing," he said, his voice low. "It's not a proper arrangement, but it's an arrangement." Eleanor's heart leapt. "Anything," she breathed. He looked away. "This ranch is falling apart. I can't afford a crew, and the bank is breathing down my neck. I need a wife, not for love, but for the bank. They're more likely to extend credit to a man with a family. We would be husband and wife on paper only. You'd have a roof over your head and food to eat, and I'd get the loan I need to save this place. It's a deal of convenience." Eleanor stared at him, but she had no other options. The fear of being alone in the West was greater than the fear of a marriage of convenience. "I accept," she whispered. He nodded once. "Good. We'll ride to Red Creek and make it official. The name's Jack Carter. You'll be Eleanor Carter." Just like that, with a simple handshake, Eleanor's life was tied to a lonely cowboy and a dying ranch. The ride to Red Creek was a quiet one. Jack rode ahead, his silence as vast as the plains. Red Creek was a small, dusty town. A few curious onlookers stared at the mismatched pair, the rugged cowboy and the refined, city-bred woman. Inside the town hall, they found the justice of the peace. The ceremony was brief and formal. When the judge pronounced them husband and wife, Eleanor felt a strange mix of relief and unease. Jack didn't even look at her as he signed the papers. Back at the ranch, life settled into a strange rhythm. Eleanor found purpose, scrubbing the cabin, mending Jack's shirts and, to his surprise, preparing flavorful meals. She planted a small garden with seeds from Boston, finding solace in the simple, repetitive tasks that were a small step away from her grief. One evening she saw Jack on the porch, his face etched with a familiar sadness. She sat beside him. "My brother. He was supposed to run this ranch with me," Jack said, his voice a low whisper. "He had a wife and a little girl. They were coming here, but their stagecoach was ambushed. They never made it." Eleanor's heart ached for him. She understood his distance now. His silence was a shield against a pain too great to bear. She didn't offer platitudes. Instead, she simply placed a hand on his arm, a gesture of shared grief. He looked at her, his stormy eyes filled with raw pain. "I couldn't save them. I wasn't there." "You couldn't have known," she said softly. "You can't blame yourself. Grief is a heavy burden." He looked at her for a long moment, a flicker of something new passing between them. A connection born not of love, but of a shared understanding of loss. For the first time, Eleanor felt a genuine sense of hope. This wasn't just a transaction anymore. It was two broken people beginning to heal together. Days turned into weeks, and the initial awkwardness between Eleanor and Jack began to fade, replaced by a quiet, unspoken understanding. Their marriage was a fragile truce against loneliness. Eleanor's presence brought a subtle yet profound change to the ranch. The cabin no longer felt like a hermit's dwelling. It had a warmth, a sense of home. She had put up curtains, brought fresh flowers from the fields, and the scent of baking bread now mingled with the smell of dust and leather. Jack, in turn, began to open up. During their silent dinners, he would occasionally tell her stories about the land, the history of his family, and the challenges of ranching. She learned about the harsh winters, the unpredictable stampedes, and the constant struggle against the elements. She saw the deep love he had for this land, a love that was a part of his very soul. One afternoon, as a storm gathered on the horizon, Eleanor noticed a small, tarnished locket on Jack's bedside table. She picked it up, her curiosity piqued. Inside, she found a faded photograph of a young woman with a kind smile, a man who looked remarkably like Jack, and a small, laughing child. A jolt of pain shot through her. This was his brother, his sister-in-law, and their daughter, the family he had lost. Jack walked in just as she was looking at the photo. His face hardened, and his eyes, usually so distant, were filled with a flash of raw pain. "Put that down," he said, his voice sharp and cold. Eleanor flinched, a sense of shame washing over her. "I'm sorry, Jack. I didn't mean to pry. I just wanted to see." He didn't answer. He snatched the locket from her hand and put it back in the drawer, a final, definitive gesture. The familiar wall he had built between them was back up, taller and more impenetrable than before. He left the room, leaving her standing alone in the silent cabin, the storm outside a perfect reflection of the tension inside. The next few days were difficult. Jack retreated into his shell, his silence heavier than ever. He left early in the morning and came back late at night, avoiding her gaze and her attempts to talk. The unspoken words hung in the air, a thick, oppressive fog. Eleanor understood. His grief was a wound that hadn't healed, and her innocent act had poured salt on it. She decided to give him space. She focused on her work, tending to the garden, and making sure his meals were ready. She worked with a quiet determination, hoping that her actions would speak louder than any words she could say. A week passed in this tense silence. One evening, as a gentle rain began to fall, pattering softly on the roof, Eleanor was sitting by the fire, mending one of Jack's shirts. He came in, his shoulders slumped, the cold and exhaustion visible on his face. He stood by the fire, warming his hands. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Eleanor looked up, her heart aflutter. "You don't need to apologize, Jack. I should have asked. It was insensitive of me." "No," he insisted, his voice a little stronger. "You didn't do anything wrong. You just reminded me. It's been so long, sometimes I forget the hurt, but it's always there, just below the surface. They were all I had left. This ranch was their dream too. We were supposed to build it together, and I was so close to saving it for them, but it's just falling apart." Tears streamed down his face, a raw and powerful display of emotion. He was no longer the impenetrable cowboy, but a broken man, mourning a family he had lost. Eleanor got up and, without thinking, put her arms around him. He stiffened at first, then slowly, his rigid body relaxed. He buried his face in her shoulder, the soft fabric of her dress a stark contrast to the rough texture of his worn-out jacket. He wept, not with the dry sobs of a man who was used to hiding his emotions, but with the deep, gut-wrenching grief of a soul in turmoil. Eleanor held him, her own tears blurring her vision. She understood now. This was not just about the ranch. It was about a man consumed by grief, a man who had been alone for too long. In that moment, the transactional nature of their relationship dissolved. They were no longer two strangers bound by a contract, but two lost souls, finding solace in each other's shared pain. The rain outside seemed to wash away the scars of the past, leaving a clean slate for a new, fragile beginning. As the last remnants of the rainstorm faded, a fragile new beginning blossomed on the ranch. The emotional breakthrough between Eleanor and Jack had changed the dynamic between them. The silence that once felt heavy and suffocating now felt comfortable and familiar. They began to work together, not just as two individuals sharing a space, but as a team. Eleanor's garden flourished under her careful attention. The small green sprouts grew into vibrant plants, a testament to her determination and a symbol of the new life she was building. Jack watched her, a quiet admiration in his eyes. He saw the way she nurtured the land, the same way she had begun to nurture his broken spirit. One afternoon, a letter arrived. It was from the bank, a final notice. They were demanding a payment he couldn't afford. The weight of the ranch, the responsibility he carried on his shoulders, threatened to crush him once again. He sat at the kitchen table, the letter crumpled in his hand, a look of utter defeat on his face. "What is it, Jack?" Eleanor asked softly. He held up the letter, his hand shaking. "It's over, Eleanor. The bank, they're going to foreclose. I can't save it. I've failed." His voice was thick with despair. Eleanor read the letter, her mind racing. They had worked so hard, had come so far. She refused to let it all fall apart now. She remembered the reason for their arrangement, the bank's willingness to extend credit to a married man. "Jack," she said, her voice firm, "they're still operating under the assumption that you're a bachelor. We need to show them that we're a family now. We need to go to town. We need to talk to them. Together." He looked at her, a flicker of hope in his eyes. He had been so used to carrying the burden alone that he had forgotten he had a partner now. They rode to Red Creek, the ride filled with a nervous energy. At the bank, they met with the loan officer, a stern-looking man with a neatly trimmed mustache. Eleanor spoke first, her voice clear and confident. She talked about their plans for the ranch, the new crops she was planting, the cattle he was raising, the small but steady income they could generate. She presented a new, hopeful vision for the future, a vision that wasn't just about survival, but about prosperity. Jack, usually so quiet, surprised himself by adding his own ideas. He talked about diversifying their crops, about buying better equipment, and about the small improvements they had already made to the cabin. He spoke with a passion she had never seen, a passion that was infectious. The loan officer, initially skeptical, listened intently. He looked at them, at their united front, at the quiet strength in their eyes. He saw not a man about to fail, but a couple, a family, with a shared dream. "All right, Mr. Carter," he said, a small smile playing on his lips. "I'll extend the loan, but you have to promise me you'll keep up with the payments. You've got a good woman here, Jack. Don't let her down." Outside the bank, Jack turned to Eleanor, a look of profound gratitude on his face. "You did that," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved us. You saved this ranch." "No," she corrected, a soft smile on her lips. "We saved it. Together." The weight that had been on Jack's shoulders for years seemed to lift. He looked at the woman beside him, at her kind eyes and her unwavering support. The transaction that had started their relationship had evolved into something more. It was a partnership, a true bond. The seeds she had planted in the garden were not the only things beginning to grow on the ranch. Something much more profound was taking root in their hearts. With the bank loans secured, a new sense of purpose and energy permeated the ranch. Jack, filled with renewed hope, worked tirelessly. He hired a few ranch hands from a neighboring town, a couple of young men who were eager to earn a wage. The ranch, once a solitary and silent place, now bustled with activity. The sound of hammers, the lowing of cattle, and the laughter of the men filled the air. Eleanor found herself taking on more responsibilities. She managed the accounts, organized supplies, and cooked meals for the entire crew. Her background in Boston, with its emphasis on order and efficiency, proved invaluable. She found joy in the hard work, in the feeling of being truly useful. One of the ranch hands, a young man named Samuel, was particularly helpful. He was polite and respectful, and he often spoke to Eleanor about her garden, asking her for advice on planting his own. Jack, who was a man of few words, would watch their interactions from a distance, a curious, almost possessive look in his eyes. One evening, after the ranch hands had gone home, Jack and Eleanor sat on the porch, the air cool and the sky filled with a million stars. "Samuel's a good kid," Jack said, breaking the silence. "He reminds me of my brother in a way. Always asking questions, always looking for a new way to do things." Eleanor smiled. "He's a hard worker. They all are. You've built something special here, Jack." He shook his head. "I wouldn't have been able to do any of this without you, Eleanor. You showed me how to fight for this place. You showed me how to live again." His words hung in the air, a confession that was both humbling and beautiful. The unspoken truths between them were becoming more and more explicit. They were no longer two people sharing a space. They were two souls on a journey of healing together. A few days later, a traveling doctor passed through the area. Eleanor, worried about Jack's persistent cough, insisted he see him. Jack, stubborn and proud, resisted at first, but finally relented. The doctor, a kind, elderly man, examined Jack. He looked at him with a knowing gaze. "You're not a young man anymore, son," he said. "You've been working yourself to the bone for too long. Your body's tired. You need to slow down. You can't do everything on your own anymore." Jack's face tightened with frustration. "I can't stop, Doc. I have to keep this place running." The doctor looked at Eleanor, a silent message passing between them. "You don't have to carry the world on your shoulders, Jack," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "You have people who care about you now. Let them help." Jack's gaze flickered between the doctor and Eleanor. He saw the concern in their eyes, the genuine care they had for him. He had spent so long being the lone wolf, the stoic cowboy, that he had forgotten what it was like to be cared for. It was a foreign, yet comforting feeling. He finally nodded, a silent surrender. "Okay," he said, the word a simple promise. The doctor's visit and Eleanor's gentle insistence had a profound effect on Jack. He began to delegate tasks to his ranch hands, trusting them with the work. He took a few hours to himself each day, sitting on the porch, watching the sunset and talking to Eleanor. He shared stories about his childhood, about his dreams, and about the man he used to be before grief had taken over. For the first time, Eleanor saw a glimmer of the man he could be, a man not defined by his sorrow, but by his hope. Just as things began to stabilize, an unexpected visitor arrived. A well-dressed man on a black horse rode up the dusty trail, a cold, calculating smile on his lips. It was Elias, the land agent. Jack's hands clenched. He wanted to throw the man off his property, but a glance at Eleanor, who had frozen in shock, made him reconsider. He needed to be calm. Well, if it isn't Mr. Carter," Elias said, his voice slick, "and you must be the charming young widow. I'm surprised you're still here." Eleanor felt a rush of anger. "You lied to me," she said, her voice shaking. "You stole my money and left me for dead." Elias laughed. I sold you a dream, my dear. It's not my fault you fell for it. And besides, it seems to have worked out, hasn't it? You got yourself a husband and a ranch. Jack stepped forward. Get off my property, Elias. Elias's smile didn't waver. I'm here on business, Jack. The bank is asking questions about your marriage. They're wondering if it's a sham. I have friends in town who could make a little phone call. That loan you're so proud of? Gone. The ranch? Back to the bank. A cold dread settled in Eleanor's stomach. He was blackmailing them. What do you want? Jack asked, his voice low and dangerous. A partnership, Elias said, his eyes glittering with greed. I want a piece of this land. We'll make a fortune. Jack's face was a mask of pure fury. I'll never do business with a snake like you. Elias shrugged. Suit yourself, but don't say I didn't warn you. I'll be in town. You have a week. He tipped his hat and rode off with a smug smile. Eleanor and Jack stood in silence. The peaceful life they had been building was now threatened. He's right, Eleanor said, her voice trembling. They'll find out. They'll take everything. Jack's eyes were filled with grim determination. Not if we stop him first. We're going to fight him. This is our home, our life. We're not going to let some slick city man take it away from us. Eleanor saw a new man. He was a man with a purpose, willing to fight for his home and for her. The confrontation had solidified their bond, making them a true team. With Elias's threat hanging over them, a sense of urgency replaced the quiet determination. They had to find a way to discredit him before he could get to the bank. What can we do, Eleanor? Jack asked at a loss. The bank will believe him. Eleanor, a woman of intellect, had a plan. He's a con artist. He's probably left a trail of victims. We need to find them and gather evidence. They rode to Red Creek. At the town hall, Eleanor's meticulous attention to detail paid off. She found that Elias had sold the same plot of land to dozens of other unsuspecting people. The evidence was overwhelming. They needed more. They visited the saloon, and the bartender, a grizzled man with a kind face, told them about others Elias had cheated. The next few days were a blur of frenzied activity. They rode to neighboring towns, gathering stories and sworn statements. The more they dug, the more they found. Elias was a master manipulator, but he had left a trail of broken promises and ruined lives. The ranch hands and the community, who valued honesty, rallied behind them, helping to spread the word about Elias's shady dealings. As the week drew to a close, they had a mountain of evidence. They found Elias in the saloon, gloating. Jack walked straight up to him. We're not going to let you win, Elias. We're going to fight. Elias laughed. You think you can stop me? I have friends in high places. Eleanor stepped forward, holding a portfolio. We have the truth. We have the names of every person you've ever cheated, their stories, their sworn statements, and we're going to take it all to the sheriff, the bank, and the newspaper. We're going to expose you for the fraud that you are. Elias's smug smile faltered. He realized this wasn't a simple blackmail scheme. It was a war, and he was outnumbered. The confrontation with Elias in the saloon marked a turning point. News of his activities spread through Red Creek. The sheriff, Marshal Thorne, a longtime friend of Jack's, began an investigation. He looked through their evidence, his eyes widening. This is impressive, Eleanor. Elias won't be in business for much longer. With the law on their side, Elias's empire of lies crumbled. He was arrested on the outskirts of town, his reign of deceit finally at an end. The bank was now impressed, seeing a couple who had not only saved their ranch, but had also exposed a dangerous fraud. Back at the ranch, a sense of peace settled over them. The weight of the world had finally lifted. One evening, Jack and Eleanor sat on the porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft hues. It's over, Eleanor said, with a quiet relief. We did it, Jack. He nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. We did. Thanks to you. You're the one who thought to fight. I would have just given up. You saved me, Eleanor, in more ways than one. He turned to face her, his eyes vulnerable. He took her hand. Eleanor, this started as a lie, but it's not a lie anymore. I've fallen in love with you. Eleanor's heart fluttered. The words were everything she had longed to hear. I love you too, Jack, she whispered. I fell in love with a man who was brave enough to let me in, a man who was strong enough to face his past and willing to heal. He leaned in and kissed her. It was a kiss of promise, a promise of a future filled with hope. The wedding was a small, intimate affair, a true celebration of their love. The entire town of Red Creek turned out, united in their joy for the couple who had fought so hard for their home. The years that followed were not without challenges, but they faced it all together. The ranch, once a lonely outpost, became a thriving homestead, a testament to their shared hard work and unwavering love. Eleanor and Jack had 2 children, a boy and a girl, whose laughter echoed through the canyons. They never forgot the past, but they learned that love could grow in the most unexpected of places, and that a home was a sanctuary built on trust and an unwavering commitment to each other. On a cool evening years later, Jack and Eleanor sat on the porch, watching their children play. He put his arm around her. "Remember that day?" she asked. He chuckled, a low, warm sound. "I remember. I thought my life was over. Then you showed up and everything changed." He looked at her, his eyes filled with love. "They didn't send the widow to the wrong ranch," he said. "They sent her to the right one." And the lonely cowboy cried, "Please stay as my wife," because he finally knew what he had always needed. He had found his home. He had found you. The sun set, casting a golden glow over their ranch. A perfect ending to a story that was just beginning.